Hello and welcome to On Air with Owen. Me, Owen Richards, founder and CEO of Air Marketing, your go-to for outsourced B2B sales and marketing, and my new co-host, fellow business owner and great friend, Neil Finnie.
Hey everyone, Neil Finnie here, founder of the Generator Work Hub, a co-working space here in the beautiful Exeter, and also Next Gen Careers, a professional development program nurturing the talents of tomorrow.
Each week, we'll be diving into the everyday truths around running your own business. And trust me, we're not sugarcoating anything. It's all about the highs, the lows, and everything between when you run your own business as a founder.
Expect candid conversations and valuable insights between the two of us. Plus, we'll be joined by some special guests along the way.
So, time to sit back and tune in to this week's honest conversation. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of On Air with me, Owen Richards, and my fantastic co-host, Mr. Neil Finnie. How are you, Neil?
Fantastic. Not like the weather though, which is damn right miserable. Still haven't had the summer started.
Probably the most British start to a podcast we've done. The weather came up within about 4 seconds. A new record. Congratulations.
I got wet walking to the pod. It's about 10
in
yards.
Your garden, right?
In my garden, 10 yards.
Oh dear.
Terrible.
Oh dear. Oh dear. Never mind. We'll there are worse things in the world, mate. It's just life, isn't it? In summer in England, we get wet. That's just what happens nowadays. We'll get through it, no doubt. Good you're indoors though. Pod's looking very nice. Background's looking very nice. Good on you. We're moving on to our guests though, because we have got a very, very exciting conversation today. We've got Will Koning joining us. Will is the founder and CEO at Meritt, and a friend of the podcast, having previously been on the podcast, and a friend of ours for a good few years. Will, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you, Owen. Thank you, Neil. Thanks for having me.
How are you?
I am very well. Thank you very much. We're in an exciting time at Meritt. So just launching my very first technology product. So yeah, not a lot of spare time, but happy to make the time to speak to you guys. Yeah.
You're in early stage founder mode, aren't you? Hands on, getting sleeves rolled up, getting down dirty.
It is all pedal to the metal. Absolutely. Yeah. It's a very exciting time. Yeah.
Love it. Well, look, thank you for joining us. We're really honoured to have you on. I think for context for our listeners, there's a reason that Will was one of the first people that I invited on, because he's got one of the sort of the best stories when it comes to learning how to be a founder that I've heard, and it's a story of both success and failure, and the learnings that come from high fast success and failure, and then how you go again and do things differently and do things better second time round. I'll let Will tell more of that story, but he's somebody that I admire and respect a lot, and I'm really hoping that we can. Well, I absolutely know you will learn from some of the experience he's had over the last 4 or 5 years. Will, maybe we could dot back and just set the scene a little bit, if that's okay. Obviously, Meritt is in early stages. Love to hear what you're doing now, and then maybe if you can transition into the headlines of SaaS Leads, your previous business that is no more, and kind of how that launched and how that started, and then we'll dovetail somewhere and get to the juicy stuff around the lessons that you learned.
Okay. Okay, cool. So Meritt, what we do, we're an early stage sales careers platform that gives access to free education and job opportunities for what I would describe as early stage careers. So think anyone from an SDR up to, I'd say, an account executive, that first 5 years. And our mission is to give everyone that access to education, access to careers for free. And then we work with employers to help identify a larger talent pool within where they're hiring. And then we help them assess those candidates so they can find the best fit candidate based on all the things that they need. And we do that with AI and reducing the time, and that reduces the time to hire in 15 days. So yeah, exciting times. Yeah.
Very good. And what stage are you at? Where have you got to?
We've got our MVP out at the moment. We have launched our first jobs board. We're adding about 3 customers a day and about 1,000 applicants a week. So like I say, done that without any marketing costs, any dev costs. So it's really bootstrapping and plate spinning at the moment. And then behind the scenes, we're working on our AI assessment features. So we've launched an MVP of our AI assessment, and we're just testing that out at the moment. So that's where we're at. Yeah.
I love that. You can take the founder out of sales, but you can't take the sales out of founder, can you? He's in selling, he's getting it off the ground, hands up. Love it.
Yeah, that's my first pitch. I hope that was okay.
Quick question from my side, Will, because obviously I have a big interest in this in terms of careers. The education part, is that something that you felt was a really important piece here, that the kind of talent pipeline that's coming through, they're not getting that educational piece? Was that a bit of a bugbear of yours?
Yeah, so that we talk about lessons from SaaS leads. Now if we talk about some of like the real value lessons that I learned from running the SaaS leads. For context, that was SaaS Leads Academy was a sales development boot camp that I founded during COVID, and the real insight was when you combine education and recruitment for those early stage careers. So we're talking like that entry level sales development. So Owen, big in your space, right? Those people that are probably first time in a sales role if they're young. When you teach them how sales is, what the career of sales is, so not just like how to do it, but like what it is and why it's awesome. If you can combine that with a recruitment piece, it becomes incredibly effective for hiring. So in answer to your question, yes, for those really, really early roles, I think education is key from a hiring perspective. What we're learning, however, is with those slightly more senior roles, if you've got 6 months to plus experience, what's more important is the assessment of the candidate as opposed to the education. And that's been a learning journey in the last 6 months.
That's interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. So let's go back to firstly. I'd love to obviously get more into Meritt, and we'll do that maybe towards the back end of the conversation. The real learnings come from your time at SaaS Leads, and then how you're applying those learnings into Meritt. So let's try maybe work in chronological order. So SaaS Leads, you're in the middle of a COVID lockdown, and you decide to start a business for the first time.
No, not true. So my first business, I did it before COVID. So I'd started working remotely before COVID, which I think gave me an edge back then because no one knew what the heck they were doing. I was already working from Barcelona when COVID hit, living the dream. So I was used to remote work, but I was running a consultancy and my consultants were US based. So I lost all my customers during COVID because COVID. And then when the tech started picking up, they said, hey, can you go again? And I said, no, but I started the academy. So I founded the academy during COVID. And so September 2020, we launched the academy. And then by September, 2023, we were out of business.
But so much happened in between, didn't it? I mean, look, I go back to first meeting you at that early stage, and we ended up on a virtual lockdown coffee, as you do, and that's when we first met you. We were both sharing war stories of getting an outsourced sales type business off the ground, and you were asking questions about my journey and what learnings you could get from that, and then the next 18 months, 2 years, I can't remember the timeline. You'll be able to define that a bit more accurately. You just rocketed, didn't you? People were talking about you in our sector. People knew your brand. You had a lot of people coming through. You did a great job on content. You were hiring left, right, and center. So much growth.
I'd say of those things that we get right, and I look at some of the guys posting like Zooms of the classes that they do on LinkedIn now. Now, I don't want to take credit for it, but I'm pretty sure I was one of the first people to really do stuff like that. Do you remember? I remember putting it, and I remember it going off, and no one was doing that at the time. And there was so much, I think, oh my God, I really had like an impact on how things are done today. I'm not taking full credit, but there was definitely some stuff, and there's things that we did right. I think fundamentally, the thing, if I say what we did right, is that we put 200 people into full-time work in COVID when no one could. And just so everyone understands, it's not like we just found them a job and trained them. No, we hired them for 3 months as well, right? Because we wanted to de-risk it for our customers to a point where it was a no-brainer. And that's how we achieved that astronomical growth. And it was going really well during COVID. But what happened is, as COVID started to tail out and people started to do stuff again, their cost of living increased, and the cost of living increased. And then suddenly paying candidates minimum wage to a little bit more for 3 months in the hope of a return for, you know, that 40K SDR senior tech salary just wasn't enough. They couldn't survive that 12 weeks with us with that. So our cost margins started getting absolutely battered. And then the second thing that happened was that the quality, as the increase of SDRs happened, the quality of candidate also decreased, right? Because the market, remember, that market was going crazy. So we had all of these sort of things that we couldn't control. And then on the other side, we had a price point, and, you know, our price point was already, for the customer to get that pushed off at board, was quite high. So for us to have pushed it more became increasingly more challenging as the markets slowly started to deteriorate a bit, which we all went through. So yeah, a lot of like learnings about the high level economics of everything, I think, was there. I assumed the market was always going to go up. Whoops.
That's that naivety of doing something for the first time, isn't it? And yeah, it sounds like a perfect storm.
Yeah, those things are so important to like experience, that markets can go down as well as up. And I imagine most founders typically start when the market goes up or it's at the bottom, because that's typically how the cycles work. But you only know that when you've done it. You know? Like just the reality of it all. Yeah.
If we go back to that time, where you obviously started with a revenue number of 0, as everyone does at some point. You, as I understand it, you didn't have investors with big numbers putting in early stage funding. You were running at it with your own time and money, and then you grew organically. What did you get? What did you get to revenue wise, or what was your sort of run rate you managed to achieve in those couple of years?
Our best quarter was 850K.
Wow.
And but then the very next quarter, Y Combinator sent a message out to all their founders saying, extend your runway to 2 years now. And I remember sitting on a plane going from Mexico. I'd been at a wedding to the UK, probably not feeling my best, trying to figure out how many VC-backed companies that I had in my client portfolio, and it was 85%. The very next quarter we did 200K, and then the business essentially imploded. Yeah.
And at the time you talked to me about the fact that whilst doing that, you'd obviously taken that 850K equivalent run rate, and you were investing hand over fist, as you do in the next phase of growth, because you've got to buy the next phase. So you're not taking that 850 and going, I've got a really good margin in there, walking away with lots of money in your pocket. You're saying reinvest, hiring expensive people, spending on marketing, spending on process improvement as you do, and then the next phase doesn't come, and it gets very difficult, right?
It just swallowed up. And you know, I had a term sheet from a venture capitalist for 1.8 million. So we were raising at the same time because we knew that we'd need some capital. And I got the term sheet, but I decided not to take it because the writing was on the wall. I would have lost money just by trying to make it work. And now we know with hindsight, the market has been tough, shall we say. You know, you don't want to make too many excuses, but you know, no one's going around saying, hey, I want to hire an SDR on the chance they might not work for 20 odd grand.
Yeah, so true. Very true.
So, yeah, so that was a real sort of lesson. But you know, you're constantly just trying to make the best decisions at the time. The biggest problem when you think about that is that we were a professional service. The big mistake I made was we were a professional services company trying to grow like a SaaS company. Because my experience in my career was always SaaS. We were in a growth of all costs environment. We were essentially creaming money off these investments, not actual off. It wasn't like these tech companies were actually making real money. They'd raised 100 odd million from a VC, and then they took the money to invest it into SDRs. And that's what we were doing. We weren't necessarily taking money off profits they were making. So when now we're in a lot more of a disciplined business world of business right now, because it is about revenues and it is about profits, which is not a bad thing. It's not like there's that free capital just throw at SDRs. SDRs can be, for the wrong company, a massive expense that don't work out, which we saw a lot. Also, other businesses, they tend to think they've got a lead gen problem, and I'm sure you might think this quite a lot, Owen, but then you realize really quickly it's not just a lead gen problem. You've got
a sales problem,
and a product market fit problem. And they're two things that we can't solve for our clients. Right.
Just a quick thing. I'm going to kind of jump in here because obviously the two of you, sales. I'm aware there are people outside the scope of sales that might not understand some of the terminology that's banging around here. So you're talking a lot about SDRs or sales representatives or sales development representatives. What kind of role do they play in the organization and that focus? I'm just kind of making sure that maybe all listeners understand the terminology that's coming through here.
So in when you have a sales organization, you've got two types of salesperson, very high level. You've got salespeople that can close deals, the revenues. That's your typical sales executive, sometimes known as an account executive. They tend to focus on either generating leads and closing or just closing. You have a sales representative that's called a sales development representative, sometimes known as a business development representative. They are essentially at the highest level appointment setters and opportunity creators that allow their account executives to have more leads for them to close. So it's someone that sits between the bridge of marketing and like the closing of the sales. It's typically, and this is very debatable, an entry level role. Where you would do it as your first role. So it's kind of less responsibility than a revenue number, although it's got a ton of complexity as well.
Perfect. And I guess for you at that time, again, it's getting as many of those into those organizations through that kind of early stage, which was, everyone's growing, they need that. But I guess they're the first to go as well at that time. It's like you're pushing them out, you're not recruiting at the bottom. Yep. And that was your main kind of, I guess your main point of revenue there was providing that was your focus.
That's all we did, Neil. Yeah, was sales development representatives, because that's how I became enamored with sales development, SDRing, and the concept of it, because it's kind of like a cross between sales, which is like the art of selling and all of that stuff, how you communicate, working with customers, problem solving. I love all that. But then it's got this kind of like marketing scientific discipline to it, which is, the tech, the numbers, the conversion rates. And those things, for me, when I first heard about it, I was like, oh, that joins a gap. And that, for me, just like it just hit both sides of my brain, basically.
And what we have to do is set the scene around the demand at the time as well, Neil. So this is just one example of one story, and this was not uncommon. In those days, I was hosting a series of events in the SaaS industry called Sales Confidence, and I remember one guy standing on the stage and saying, "We've just got landed. We've been through Series A, B, and C in the period of 9 months or 10 months. We've got a headcount target of 50 SDRs in the next 3 months." So we're talking about organizations getting a headcount increase of 50 and they've got to hit that target in 3 months. I mean, when at the time, I remember saying, you think of the efficiency or inefficiency of that and how insane that was to think that you could grow a team of 50 fairly junior hires. They were overpaying, as in, paying more than the market rate to get those people in, because they had so much money in the bank to drive growth. And it was so much about, let's show that growth quickly. There was no pressure to deliver profitability or efficiency in there. It was just about go fast and go as fast as possible. And
because that bubble was growing and growing and growing at that time.
Yeah, like if you actually sort of want to sort of point a finger, the VC market was pushing this beyond belief. It was crazy. Like, look at Hopin. Have you heard of that story? Right, they raised $1 billion in COVID, and they sold it to. I'm going to get my numbers wrong, but I think they sold it to like a fairly well-known company for like 15 mil. Like.
Yeah,
and so I saw one of their VPs of sales trying to proclaim that as a success. Are you kidding me? It was crazy. Yeah, it was unbelievable.
But a question for you, Will. At that time, obviously, we see it a lot in tech at these moments in time where we have these bubbles. Ultimately, we know they're going to burst. Yeah. It's very, very rare that they keep growing. I know you spoke about that flight back from Mexico, maybe a bit hungover at that certain moment in time. But were you ever before that thinking this can't last, or this growth isn't sustainable, it's going to burst at some time? Like, did you have anything in the back of your mind? It's like, too good to be true. This is too quick.
I tell you when I had. So that was in like the summer, July. I remember the first, like, we were always dealing with like, oh my God, grow or die. Like, don't get me wrong, right? Like, grow or die, because that's literally what we were doing. We needed sales to keep the thing going, and that's kind of standard in the early days. But there was this moment. I tell you what, it was New Year's Eve. It was New Year's Eve that year before, so years 2021 to 22, And I was there sort of tapping away at my keyboard at 10 o'clock at night on New Year's Eve, right? And I was like, where's the data on the academy? As in, so my co-founder was running the academy, and it was just, there wasn't any. And it was like this, in my heart, deep in my belly, it's like, oh, shit. And fleetingest of moments, right? Because in founder, you need optimism and denial a lot of times, right? You do, otherwise, you're gonna get caught up. But it was this one moment I remember. I can still remember it. It's clear as day now. It was just in the pit. It was in the pit, and I was like, there's something wrong here. And it's, I don't know if you as founders ever know. It's like you're like, something, but you can't even put it into words. It was that, and I just remember it. And so that was 7 months. That was 7 months later where we were like, okay, we're in trouble, but I just knew it then.
With so one of the things we've spoken about in the past, and it's interesting because you touched on not having the data and your co-founder being across that part of the business. We talked about the fact that, one of the challenges, and I've been through the same journey, is as you scale a business, you become further and further away from things. So you build it because you're passionate and you're good at something and you can see the value in that, and you enjoy doing it, and then you go, right, in order to grow this business, I've got to step away from certain things, and I've got to let somebody else own that and drive that. And we talked about the fact, and again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, so maybe you can fill in the gaps on this, about the fact that the further away you got from things, you didn't necessarily put in the mechanisms, and let's take ownership of it rather than point the finger, but didn't necessarily have the mechanisms in place to hold people accountable, have the data and information to tell you it was still going well, or to raise the flag early enough to say that's not going as well as it would have done before. I've got to step back in and manage that part of the business again. So it'd be interesting to hear your lessons around that.
Yeah. So the things I got wrong ultimately, and this is with hindsight and all of the forgiveness. I've forgiven myself, right? But here's where I went wrong. I didn't have the appropriate governance in my board and how I run my company and those checks and balances. I did not insist upon the culture that I wanted in my organization. And I think culture is sometimes even if it's not like the ping pong tables and all that stuff, like culture is deeply misunderstood in an organization. I choose to take the Ben Horowitz view of culture, which is like what we do is who we are. And it's what you do when no one else is looking, right? And if you have that right culture in place, you don't necessarily need a process or a strategy to make the right decision as an employee. I did not insist upon it, and I allowed the wrong people within my organization to frankly take the piss, right? And that was from co-founder level, the person that I brought in, all the way through to some of my later hires. I was hiring on vanity. I was hiring on like LinkedIn popularity because, that was a thing. I was not hiring on Meritt, ironically, but it's not that in. But the point being is I made that, I put the wrong people in, definitely. And then I put the wrong processes in, the wrong strategy and the wrong process. And then I spent too much money, all those things. They were all
mistakes.
Do you think, had hindsight, we've got that time machine, we can go back to a time before, putting those changes in place, would it have made a difference, considering the grander economic kind of impact? Like, could it have been saved?
So I fired my co-founder, and then I got to work, right? And I learned one thing. we could have survived, right? If we made the necessary changes and the necessary cuts to do it, I think we would have survived. I really do. What people don't know in that summer. So when after I got back from Mexico, I just started firing my founder. I cancelled that term sheet, and I was like, right, I'm going to rebuild the academy, because I brought in that co-founder to build that academy. He's an expert. He's not. I then refashioned it in my own manner, and I did it. I fired most of the people in the business, or we went through a round of redundancies, and we got the academy moving. And that academy, that cohort that we had, my first cohort that we had, was the most successful cohort ever in the academy, because I'd styled it in my own fashion, and we would have survived. But just so you understand, like, I was creating a lesson at 5 a.m. I was delivering that lesson at 9 a.m.
And it was too late by then, wasn't it? I mean, it was
the bit I'm hearing it. So had I had balls, frankly, or to make those calls harder and faster, and stop caring about the, should I say, the wokey stuff, because there was a lot of that. I allowed a lot of that in my business. I had people in my business petitioning me about why I should have like my pronouns on my that, and I'm like, fine, but you do you, but I don't want that on me for my own personal choices. And also, why are we not focusing on revenue metrics? And we are completely focused on things. So I removed all of that from the business. I got rid of all of it, and it was tough. I'm proud of it now. Yeah, at the time I was heartbroken, but I'm proud I made those calls. And had we done all that sooner, we would have survived just, but going on, I had 30 employees plus a bunch of students. It probably would have been closer to like 3 employees, to survive. So I'm glad I didn't.
Right.
I guess the point there is that it just would have been different, wouldn't it? It would have, all businesses go through iterations and changes where it's not always upwards. And sometimes there are periods where it's about surviving, just like your clients were told, make your run rate 2 years. They weren't doing the same things, but they lived through that to get the next phase of growth afterwards.
Will, I hope you don't mind. I'm gonna rewind to something you said as well, because I think it's like that a lot of people I've spoken to in the last kind of couple of years have thought about this kind of co-founder thing, which can be really difficult. And I don't know if you had a relationship with your co-founder beforehand, or if it was someone that you brought in specifically.
Yeah.
But that moment of removing a co-founder, that's quite a tricky thing. And I think it's probably one of those relationships that you hold on to for too long, because it's maybe a difficult in regards to the mechanics to get someone out. It's maybe a relationship kind of dynamic in there as well. Are you able to expand on that a little bit more?
So this co-founder I worked with as a sales executive when I was at Perkbox. We were both in the trenches together, and we were at the time brothers in arms, right? Perkbox was a real serious success story in those early days, going from 0 to 1 million MRR in a month. Getting in 12 months, we're doing that every month, getting to 1 million. You can imagine the chaos that ensued there. So this person was very dear to me. Became a sales development expert after Perkbox. I decided to do this academy, so I brought this person in. Makes sense, right? The credentials are there. What it turned out was this person didn't know much about sales development. They hired their way through problems, and they had that kind of like VC mentality of just hire, as opposed to doing any work and getting your hands dirty. And the expectations were off. Also, that person wasn't very good at like dealing with difficult situations. Just like in general, you find difficult situations, and he became more of a problem than a solution. However, it was getting to the point, I don't even ever had this when someone one of your team goes on holiday and you look underneath the car bonnet and you realize it's a mess. And it's around there. That was probably some of the more like harrowing stuff that I'd probably been through, was like, oh my God, it is a mess under there. What is going on? So, that kept happening. And so in the end, we came to the decision that, he wasn't going to be in the business anymore. I say but at that time it got really, really bad. So, we were still seeking an amicable resolution. He had a share of the business, not a majority. And instead, this person went very bitter. He blackmailed me. I still have the email saying, if anyone ever comes and works for you again, I'm going to go and tell them that you are a bully and a cheat, and I've got this dossier on you saying I'm racist, saying I'm sexist, saying I'm that. It was horrific, horrific. This person, by the way, is a big social media person now, right? You would be forgiven for thinking that, but it was a horrific experience. And Owen, I touched you. I'm not going to go into it, but that's when all like the suicidal thoughts coming, and you've got this person, whilst you're doing everything to save these people's jobs, by the way.
Yeah, that's really tough.
In your power. I haven't taken salary for 3 months. He tried to sue me for £875,000, which I didn't have because I raised that money, and the business was theoretically worth like 10 million. He did everything in my power to destroy the business based on his misgivings and walking away. It was truly a horrific. I've had 3 horrific sales experiences in my sales career. One is trying to be sued by a large PLC, One is the founder breakup, one is the dissolution of the company, and they were the three most horrific experiences of my entrepreneurial.
For the again, kind of keeping on the founder one, because it's a difficult thing, isn't it? Because you think you know someone and you kind of come together and they've got equity in the business and they're co-founders. Things go wrong, and would it have made the scenario any easier had you ripped the band-aid off quicker, or even in that kind of early stages in deciding on who to bring on? Like, what lessons can we learn here? Because I think it's a trap that lots of people fall into. And it's like, it's not going great with my co-founder. They've got equity. Like, what the hell do I do?
Okay, so first things first is before you bring on a co-founder, you make the appropriate arrangements. So I have a co-founder today. Don't get me wrong, I'm not scared of having co-founders. God damn, you need co-founders. But number one, you hire a complementary skill set, not a similar skill set. We were both sales leaders. You're going to inevitably have a difference of opinion. Well, who's in charge? Right, frankly, that becomes a problem. So hire co-founder complementary that. So for this example, I've got a CTO because I can't code. So I do the sales and marketing and all that good stuff, running the company, etc. He builds the product. He's head of products and technology. And then the bits that we don't know, we work together on, and we have a great working relationship where I have ideas and he figures out how we do it. It's wonderful. I love it. He's a good friend. We have sleepovers, all of that. It's good. So that's the first thing. The second thing is you need to make sure legally you're protected. So you need to make sure you have a cliff investing schedule for your founders that have that 5 years. Like, this guy's in it for 5 years. So that if it doesn't work out within that first 12 months, he only keeps some shares and he gives the majority back, and so on. So it's not so bad. But even then, if he did leave in 2 years and you were trying to raise VC, you're probably in a bit of a pickle. So not ideal.
It's interesting. I'd like to jump in here because I think one of the things I've had this conversation a lot of times, in varying shapes and sizes. The advice I've always given to people, and I think this is worth taking away, the best thing I ever did with my business partner, and he owns 30% of the business, so he's a minority shareholder, but a shareholder in the business, and an important one. Best thing we ever did, and we're still happy, is plan for what happens if we're not. So in our shareholder agreement, we agreed on all of the circumstances that could go wrong. Now, neither of us wanted that to happen or expected it, but it covers what happens if one of us goes to prison and can't contribute. What happens if one of us dies? We decided we don't want to be in a scenario where that defaults to us working with the other's spouse as a shareholder, and where we have to get permission with somebody we've never worked. You're suddenly working with somebody you didn't sign up to work with. So there is a process for that that's documented, and we had all of those difficult conversations up front. And my view is simple: if you can't have those conversations and be comfortable expressing your opinion of what you think should happen in that scenario and be fair to each other and come out agreeing, there's no chance of you being good, successful co-founders together. And I think that's the bit that people miss. They go 50-50 or they do whatever, and they don't have anything in place, that all of the default company's house stuff plays in, and then nobody knows what to do, and it's painful. Do that difficult stuff up front. Have those difficult conversations.
I agree. And one of the things that me and my co-founder did when we were co-founder dating, as they call it, we deliberately had an argument.
Tell us, how do you do that?
Yeah, so
me and my wife do that all the time. He's like, arguments can be positive or they can be negative, and it's important to have a conflict of opinion. So we sat there with a beer and we took opposing opinions, something we didn't agree on, we argued, right? And it's like, at the end of an argument, do I hate this guy? Or actually, do you know, it should be all right. And ideally, what you're trying to figure out is, can you guys have very difficult conversations? Because we're constantly up against difficult conversations, which directions to go. We also know that we go one way, we can't go the other. That's heavy stuff. So yeah, having that ability to fight has weirdly aligned us. We don't fight all that much, but we've been doing it a year now, so we'll see. Sorry, you've been fighting for a year.
No, we only one. Look, that's the only argument. But yeah, no, it's just that ability to, I think the point being is, can you as a team, as a pair, like, handle some really tough stuff, right? Because it's only going to get tougher. The market's outrageous. We're picking up now, and we're starting to feel that workload come through, and it's like, okay, head in the game time, everybody,
So if you move through to there's some fantastic lessons in there, right? And I think that, they talk about the fact you learn more through failure, and I think here's a great example of where that has happened. Naturally, that would have been really, all of that is horrendous, and I feel for you, because it's just the managing you're keeping your head in the right place, keeping afloat, but financially you didn't pay yourself for 3 months, and then you've got no business, so you can't pay yourself for a period of time after that. You've got to go and reset identity. You've got to deal with the impact on pride and all those sorts of
Oh
things
yeah,
that I'm envisaging. Must
yeah,
have been really tough. And I know we've touched on it. You've talked openly about the fact that you had suicidal thoughts and it was very difficult. And what we're not going to do is dig into the mental health side today, because I think we're looking for that functional learning, but I also want to acknowledge it and just say out loud that firstly, good on you for getting through that and for going again, because that's incredibly impressive, and I know that you will be a better second time founder than first time founder, no doubt. So I guess, other than the co-founder thing, there's some lessons there and you're doing it differently. What are the other things that you're doing differently this time? How have you approached the Meritt journey? Tell us what's working well and what you've done differently this time round.
Yeah, so I think I can't really understate the importance of having that complementary founder skill set. I have a CTO, so obviously there's a lot of people you see there, they're building tech right now, and if you see that they haven't got a CTO, what I know is that if they are building tech, they're having to throw money at that every time to make a fix or a change. I don't have to do that, so we can iterate on the problems significantly faster without cost, right? And that, I can't really stress how valuable that is. And then how we make decisions. It's not a democracy at the moment. It is what I want. So I made that mistake of making it too much of a democracy in the early days of SaaS Leads, and that was a mistake. As it currently stands, until we've got enough customer data coming through and enough customer feedback, which we listen to all the time, by the way, the decision making sits with me, and that's something I did arrange with my co-founder. How we build it, that's totally on him. I have no idea, but the directions in which we go ultimately sit to me and no one else. And
so clear ownership, clear lanes, clear who's doing what.
Yeah. And I no nonsense. No nonsense, getting on with it. We make it work. And it's on me. I take full accountability and responsibility, all that kind of stuff. The second thing I think that's so important is how we think about things. So we think smart. So I came up with something, but everything's got to be scalable, measurable. You've got to have accountability. It's got to be repeatability. If we think this idea has those 4 things, we test it. So that's smart. And then within that, we have a culture of velocity. So that's that fail fast mentality. Like, when you fail, to your point, Owen, failure is the best learning. It's always the best learning. It can be so profound or it can be so quick, right? And the faster you fail, the faster you learn, the faster you make changes. So really thinking like a technology lean startup company now is how we think. And then, we are not going to hire as many people. I fundamentally now believe, with everything I've learned about AI and automation and everything else, that you can now build, a 4 or 5 million ARR company with 10 people. And that will be that. I have no intention of having too many people again. But
there's no lack of ambition there, is there? What I'm sensing from you is, yes, I'm going to do it differently, but it's not like you're once bitten, twice shy on the journey. You are as hungry today, or at least that's how I perceive you, as hungry to go and build a big successful business as you were back in 2020, 2021.
So what happened when we were finally all done and dusted with the academy was that I had to get a job. And because I know a lot of investors, they were like, hey, Will, go and I was the chief commercial officer interim at a company called Eola, and I had to go and save a company that had raised too much money and didn't have enough ARR. And so it was like back in it, like immediately. I'm not even joking. The company hadn't even properly died yet, and I'm doing this, but I got it in a year. I learned a lot very quickly. I was able to put those lessons back in. And so it gave me a lot of validation that I'm not perhaps just a one-hit wonder, and that maybe I do have a lot still to give. And I learned a lot about technology companies, what to do and what not to do. And so I went straight in. I went straight in, I got my head down, and you see I wasn't posting on LinkedIn, I wasn't focusing on any of that nonsense. I was getting my head down, I was taking my licks, I was going to therapy, I was saving this company. And in that time, what I learned was how to be lean, how to do all these things, how to, and you know, I got that company to profitability, and I went. So yeah, that just really helped me like know that I've got it again. And so that ambition
Is it like a
never,
recharge period? You're like
yeah,
recharging, finding
yeah.
the energy and the focus and the confidence to back yourself again.
Yeah, the confidence took a hit.
Mm.
I think any founder that's lost their business, there's no way that doesn't take their confidence, because you've just put your heart and soul into this thing. But I've also learned, Owen, it's not my personality. If Meritt fails, I'm not a failure, right? It's a million reasons why Meritt could fail, right? It's simply only one reason why it survived. But like, I'm not defined by the success or the failure of my business. I'm defined by the fact that I've got a wonderful life outside of that. You know, I've got good friends, I'm engaged now, you know, all of that, you know, and so I think having that ability to separate as well is probably a massive learning. Don't get me wrong, it's like 13, 14 hours a day right now.
You're in.
I have a life outside of this. I do. And I think so you think about those lessons, it's so important. So yeah, think smart. Remember, it's not just the work. When I see founders posting how they haven't taken a holiday in 5 years, right, I kind of get it, but I also, now I'm a bit more into it, I'm like, I don't get it. I don't get it. You can't figure out how to take a couple of weeks off a year, you probably shouldn't be doing an entrepreneurship job, right? You know, like, especially in the world of AI automation, you know, you can hire someone for $10 an hour in the Philippines now. That's a fact. I've got to. You know, it's like, it's these things all, you should be trying to figure all this stuff out as an entrepreneur in 2024, I think. Yeah.
And with Meritt, how have you come about funding that? Obviously, what you're not going to go and do is take loads of money from an investor and with a 12-month run rate and go and spend it all on SDRs. I get that message. So what are you doing when it comes to funding the growth of Meritt?
Yes. So how I started again, I decided I was going to go again last summer. So I found my co-founder before I even quit my job and all of that kind of stuff. And then in October, I went on my own, and I started doing what I do best, which is, well, not what I do best, but I started what I can do very well, which is consulting. You know, I've had the privilege of working with over 100 B2B SaaS companies through my career and SaaS leads. So when it comes to building sales orgs and stuff like that, you know, it's worth paying me a retainer. And we've been lucky enough to generate, I'd say, about £150,000 in consulting fees, which has just funded Meritt and the small team that we have. Don't get me wrong, I had to pay off a load of debt with it as well. Like, you know, it's from the aftermath. But that is just about giving me enough seed capital to put Meritt on the ground. And I think a message to other founders that are thinking, oh my God, I've got to raise to build this product. If you actually think about that, you're starting in a bad place, right? Because really, when you raise money, if you decide to raise money, it should be to focus on growth rather than trying to bring a product to market. Not always possible, granted, but I would, when I do take investment, which I imagine that we will, it will be because I know when I put one marketing dollar in here, I get 10 out. Which is a much better way to take money, right? I'll take that money all day long, but not to try and find product market fit. Yeah.
Well, question for you here. Do you think that reason now specifically, and you touched on it before, because of the adoption of AI and what AI can do and how we can think smarter about our businesses, whereas beforehand that capital injection might have been needed to at least even get that kind of MVPs off the ground, whereas nowadays, actually, if you just do some research and you build things out, you focus on one thing, you know, it's not actually going to take a lot of time or cost a lot of money to do that.
Yeah, it's going to be, look, it's two things you've got to care about, I reckon. If you put it down to that, yes, you need a product, right? And you can build that with no code, low code. I still not a big fan of low code, no code, because like I still don't know what I'm doing, frankly. I've got a CTO for that. But it's the product piece you've got to care about, and you can get that to market now with very little capital. But the second thing you need to have is community, right? And community, we say it's sales and marketing, right? And engaging a bunch of people. So I think as a founder, in your first steps to try and find that elusive product market fit, you need those two things, right? And there's a million which ways we can slice and dice how you get that, but they're the two things that we're focusing on today. So how do I engage a community of people that want jobs versus people that want to hire for jobs, and then how do I get a product that works within that community? And if you can focus on those two things without running out of cash, I think that's how you win in 2024. And yeah, you can do it on the cheap because of all this stuff. And it's amazing what you can do. Like I'm testing an AI assessment right now for SDRs that within a 10-minute questionnaire, video questionnaire, it analyzes 500 data points. Right. I'm building that. Like I'm building my co-founder, the technical one, isn't building that. Right. It's crazy what you can do when you start to really learn this stuff. Right. It's crazy. Yeah. And I think any founder right now, if they're not doing that, and they're starting a business, then I'd be doing that right now. Yeah.
Obviously, with Meritt, your learnings in regards to what you were doing beforehand with the SaaS Academy and everything else, you're going to take that away. You mentioned community. I guess for you do have somewhat of a community you can port across, especially from those organizations looking to recruit. How are you getting that community of those early stage kind of individuals in their careers? You know, you're reaching out to graduates or, you know, certain business schools. Like how are you building that community? Because I guess that's maybe new for you.
Yes, no. I mean, we did it a lot with SaaS leads in the academy, but like I think with both the B2C side, so the candidate side, and the B2B side, so we've got two-sided marketplace, right? How we're doing it, frankly, is through hustle and grit and communication and hand-to-hand, building those small relationships, right? As we evolve, we are building, our social platforms, right? So if you go on Instagram, you can see we're starting to do that. If you go on LinkedIn, I've got my B2B stuff. I have a love-hate relationship with LinkedIn. And we are, with all our customers that we're adding on, they all get a Slack channel so they can message us directly. We have someone that's doing like feedback with our candidates, like how can we make it better? How can we help you? Slowly. It's all free, Neil, apart from hard work and hustle, frankly. Is it scalable? Not today, but will it be? Yeah, I reckon so.
Love that. Cool. Well, we're coming towards the end. I think it's been a really insightful conversation, and I'd like to just say a really big thank you for being so open and honest and transparent with us. Thanks, over what must be a very difficult memory to pull from. I guess just to give you an opportunity to maybe we haven't asked the right questions, or maybe we've missed some things. Is there anything else from that journey at SaaS Leads in particular that you think is worth, I'm starting a business for the first time, or I've just started, or I'm thinking of doing it, and you've just got that valuable lesson from that period of time? Is there anything else that you would say to people?
Yeah, do you know what? The lesson I've had to relearn in the last 3 weeks since I've come back from a bit of a summer break is, man, believe, right? Just believe it. Like, I believe what I'm doing now, and I've had to really, and as soon as that belief's come, the innovations come back, and I think the passion that you can create around in that aura that creates around you attracts people to you. I think I was still unconfident prior to my break that I had in the summer, and the difference is crazy, right? So in order to believe, you have to truly believe. Now, if you're going around trying to build some kind of like new way to spam the internet, you know what I mean? Like, it's not something I get passionate about. I got asked to do some of that stuff as a founder, and I was like, nope, not doing it because I don't believe it. I'm not passionate about it in the same way I'm passionate about taking someone from 0 to 1 in sales, right? So have that passion. If you're not passionate about it, don't do it, because the money doesn't come yet. I hope it does. Got a wedding to pay for. If you're doing it, the point being, if you're doing it just for the money, go and get a job. Seriously, like, just go and get a job, because the unbelievable amount of crap you have to get through is a lot. However, if you do it and you love it, you're glad you take the licks and the crap and do it. I'll do it all day long. Like, I work 15, 16 hours a day, and I enjoy it. I love what I do. I love it. Right. And now I've done this thing, but it's now been